Hello and welcome to this Future Leaders Group members only tutorial, which is titled Be Proactive and Begin with the End in Mind. Of all the people I've been coached by and worked with, Dr. Stephen Covey is without doubt the one who has inspired me the most. I was incredibly lucky to meet him on several occasions and to be coached directly in his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People program, the most important personal development workshop I've ever encountered. In this members only tutorial, I'd like to introduce you to the first 2 of the 7 habits, as they are foundational in developing you to fulfill your potential to be the best leader you can possibly be. I'll also share some of the principles that underpin the 7 habits, indeed are the bedrock for building an extraordinary life and an extraordinary career. The 7 habits can be divided into 2 key parts. Habits 1, 2, 3 and 7 address self, moving from dependence to independence. And habits 4, 5 and 6 focus on relationships with others and creating interdependence. Each habit is sequential, leading on to the next. So let's start with habit 1, which is titled Be Proactive. The underlying principle of habit 1 is that every single person is free to choose whatever they wish for and are responsible for the choices that they make. So the expression, I have to, isn't part of the language of habit 1. Instead, it's replaced with, I choose to. I've been challenged on this many times. People have said to me, yeah, it's fine in theory, but I've got a mortgage to pay. Or things like, I have no choice. I have to put food on the table. I've also been told, I'm tied to this area, I can't move. Or, I've spent my whole life in this industry doing it this way. It's too late for me to change now. These are just a few examples of the language of reactive thinking people. Proactive people recognise their ability to choose, that they always have options, whatever the circumstances. If I meet a reactive person who I think has the potential to change their mindset to a proactive one, then I'll tell them the story of Viktor Frankl, author of Man's Search for Meaning. Frankl, an Austrian Jewish neurologist and psychiatrist, was a Holocaust survivor. Indeed, having been incarcerated in not 1, but 3 different concentration camps, including Auschwitz, his remarkable story has inspired millions of people. Frankl decided to adopt a proactive mindset in order to address his circumstances. He determined that never before had anyone with his education and experience been put into such an environment, and he studied the way his fellow inmates chose to react to their appalling conditions. In simple terms, he chose to look at his 3 years in the camps as a scientific experiment. I accept this is an extreme example, but I use it to make the point that however awful a place someone finds themselves in, they always have options as to how to respond. Stephen Covey developed several models to enable switching from being reactive to being proactive. The first one he called stimulus response. Reactive people allow their responses to be influenced by their moods, feelings, or circumstances, whereas proactive people recognise that they can have reactive tendencies, so they expand the gap between the stimulus and making a response. And in the gap, they consider better options than the spontaneous responses so many people have been conditioned to give. Here's how it works. Let's say you have a difficult client who's unfairly complaining in an email about you or your service. The instinct for many people is to respond in kind, to give what they've got and to point out that it's the client that's at fault, not them. In other words, they get really defensive. Instead, a proactive response is to say something along the lines of, I hear what you say, and I'll think about it, and I'll reply shortly. That creates a gap which not only gives time to imagine better options, but to consider which are the best and right ones. And often these are not necessarily obvious, they might even fly in the face of convention. It also has another benefit, the effect of causing the other party to think through what they've said and done. I always remember my mum saying to me, if it's important, then sleep on it and see how you feel in the morning. Such great advice. Another model Stephen showed me was the circles of influence and concern, which we'll look at for our first exercise. I'd like you to draw a big circle and a smaller one inside it. In the outer ring, write anything that concerns you, whether it's stuff such as the environment or politics, but also things close to home, such as personal finances and relationships, health, work, and anything else that comes to mind. Now, in the inner circle, write the actions you can take for each of these concerns. And that's where you'll need to focus your future energy, thoughts, and actions on. Now, if there's nothing you can do about the concern, then ignore it. Cross it out. If there's an action you can take that will influence things for the better, then just get on and do it. Let me give you an example. Let's say a homeowner is worried about their personal finances. An action they could potentially take is to remortgage with a fixed rate, allowing them to consolidate their debt and to have one relatively low cost and fixed monthly repayment. Proactive people focus on the things they can do something about, and they don't waste time on stuff they can have no influence over. In other words, proactive people take control of their lives, whereas reactive ones tend to go with the flow, whether that's good or bad. Once you've determined to be proactive and realise that you have the ability to choose whatever you want, you can then move on to consider habit 2. Begin with the end in mind. Many people who switch from being reactive to proactive experience an initial shock at just how many options are available to them. In quite a few cases, it can be overwhelming. However, what a lovely issue to have. Having too many options is far better in my book than believing that you have none. The underlying principle of habit 2 is that everything is created twice. You imagine it first, you create it in your mind, and then the second creation is to go and make it happen. Please note that the creation, the process of imagining what you want, isn't the same as planning. Planning actually comes to the fore in habit 3, which we'll look at for another day. Stephen Covey introduced a 3-step process to kickstart the creativity needed to imagine the life you wish to lead, which he called have, do, be. And I'm going to ask you to use it for your second exercise. The first step, have, is the easiest, and it's in 2 parts. First of all, I'd like you to write out a long list of all the tangible things that you wish to achieve. These might include your future home, car, and other possessions. The second step is to create a list of all the intangible things, such as health, relationships, and career goals. Now, having created a very long list, the longer the better, what I'd then like you to do is to identify the top 5 most important things. These Stephen Covey calls your big rocks. The second step is titled Do. This is where you identify the contributions and accomplishments that you desire to make. You might like to consider and answer these 4 questions. If I had unlimited time and resources, what would I do? When I consider my future career, which activities do I consider of greatest worth? When I look at the rest of my life, which activities do I consider of greatest worth? And what do I imagine will be my most important future contribution to others? Your answers are likely to cause you to get a really good picture of what you'd like to do with your life from both a work and personal perspective. The third step is titled B. There's a simple exercise to complete that will cause you to understand the sort of person that you wish to be. Imagine it's your 40th, or it's a significant birthday. If you're in your 20s, then your 40th. But if you're in your 30s, you might choose your 50th or 60th. Consider all the key roles that you will have then. Partner, parent, sibling, friend, business leader, community, charity contributor, and so on. Now imagine that for each of your roles, one person is going to give a short speech at your significant birthday celebrations. Write down what you'd love them to say, not necessarily what they would say now, but what you'd hope they would say in 20 or 30 years' time. Have Do Be is a brilliant way to get clear about what's truly important to you. In summary, habit 1, be proactive, is realising that you alone are in charge of you and you can do whatever you want. Habit 2 is visualising what you want, the first creation, so that you can then set about achieving your goals. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to working with you shortly.